Do you have difficulty convincing people to listen to your advice? Do you have a hard time accepting other people's advice? Well, here are 3 tips to help you give better advice as well as receive it. Stay tuned. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe so I can keep providing perspective that empowers and encourages people. Let's work together to enrich the lives of the people around us. I'm Tatiana, poet, writer, podcaster, and social awareness advocate. And these are my words of wisdom. 2 disclaimers. First, this is not an indictment on giving advice. We have all lived a life that has taught us valuable life lessons. And you never know how your life can impact someone else's. So share your experiences. It could literally save a life. And 2, this is not an exhaustive list. These are just my top 3 in each category. So let's dive right in. First, in giving advice, don't give advice you won't take. I know this seems silly, but the number of people that give advice they wouldn't take is ridiculous. And I don't mean like someone saying, oh, I wouldn't buy this car, but you should. But even simple things like, if you really want to eat that chocolate bar, you should, but like, I would never do it. You heard me. You heard that sound petty. Do I need to explain further as to why you shouldn't do this? Don't give people advice that you wouldn't take. It can go into bigger things as well, like telling someone that they should break up with someone else, or telling someone that they should make an extreme purchase, knowing that you wouldn't do that. Do not give advice you wouldn't take. It makes you look like someone who just wants to ruin other people's lives. Even if your goal is to continue free choice, if someone's asking you for your perspective, give an honest one. Don't give them fluff answers. Don't give them advice that you yourself would not follow. It ruins your credibility. Number 2, do not hold it against people if they don't take your advice. I think this one is the hardest one for people to deal with because we feel that if we give someone advice, there's this feeling of ownership that comes with it. Like, I've given you this advice, so you follow my advice and then you'll be happy. But the truth is, I have rarely had someone come and ask me for advice and them give me the whole story. Usually it's bits and pieces. So if someone chooses to not accept your advice, it could be for a myriad of reasons, some of which your advice just isn't applicable. Maybe you thought it matched, but it doesn't match. Or maybe your advice is just a bit too difficult to implement. And I know that seems like a cop-out, but change is difficult. If it was easy, everyone would do it. It's difficult. Change in small steps though, it's a lot more manageable. So asking people to make massive changes at once, that is huge. Before I quit drinking, anyone who was like, you just stop drinking, was not gonna work. Because it's a huge thing to ask someone to just stop doing. Cut out a drink or 2 on Saturdays, go out less often, that's a smaller thing. So keep that in mind. If someone chooses to not accept your advice, do not hold it against them. Don't hold it against them. 1, you don't really know why they don't accept your advice. And 2, if you hold it against them, I can pretty much guarantee they're not gonna come back to you for advice. No one wants to walk into a situation feeling horribly judged. And that's how they're gonna feel if you hold it against them. So don't be that person. And number 3, make sure you've asked enough questions, which kind of plays into number 2. Sometimes we give advice that's not applicable because we haven't asked enough questions. Ask many questions. If the person you're giving advice to becomes defensive, that is your key to ask more questions. Non-judgmentally. Don't go in for the hard, well, did you do? No. Slowly back up and go, I'm sorry, and ask a few more questions. I promise if you do this in a non-judgmental way, you'll be able to find out more information. And then you can make sure your advice matches the needs of the person who's asking it of you. Receiving advice. Now these 3 are going to mirror the first 3. So number 1, would this person take this advice? So the person who's giving it to you, would they follow this advice? That is your number 1. And my reason is, as stated previously, Sometimes people give bad advice on accident or on purpose, but sometimes people give terrible advice. So being able to say, would this person actually do this thing they're telling me to do? Because some people really do want to watch the world burn. I mean, I'm not going to say everybody, but some people do. And some people spend way too much time watching reality TV show and they kind of think of you as entertainment. And they will tell you to do something so they can see what happens. It's like basically you're a sim and they're watching it play out. So keeping that in mind, ask yourself, would this person actually do it? I'm not assuming anyone's intentions, though we've talked about how I feel about intentions. I am saying, without knowing any of that, ask yourself, would this person take this advice? Number 2, can I live with the consequences or negative fallout of this advice? I know that one's a bit more murky, but whatever advice someone gives you, the reality is they're not the ones living with the consequences of that advice. You are. So can you deal with any potential negative fallout? Can you deal with any of the potential problems that will arise from you taking this advice? Are you capable of handling the blowback? If the answer is no, I would weigh that advice. I would weigh it, because sometimes you have to do it anyway, but I would weigh it. Keep that in mind. Because people will give you well-intentioned advice that could be bad for you. Like weight loss, that's a prime example, because I know I'm fat and everybody has an opinion about it. A lot of people give me interesting advice about things I shouldn't do. And I know from personal experience that some of the diets that they recommend might kill me. So it's fun, but the point is, I know what will and will not work for my body. I'm the one who's been in this body for a hot minute. So when people give me advice of things, I have to say, can I deal with the consequences of doing this? If the consequences are, I don't know, death, the answer is no, and so I don't do it. But the consequences don't have to be that dire. Sometimes the consequences can be far less intense. But still, the reality is, someone gives you advice, can you handle the consequences of not following that advice? Of following that advice? If you can, go for it. Number 3, does this advice actually apply to my situation? I know this is kind of number 2, but plus. But yes, does the advice that they're giving you apply to your situation? Sometimes people are just talking, and then somewhere in there they go, and you should do this. And you're like, how did we get to me? You were talking about something entirely different. That happens a lot. Does the advice apply to you? If it doesn't, just let it go and move on. It's people want to be helpful and they feel like the only way they can be helpful is to give you advice. The truth is, people don't know how to have conversations anymore. We haven't been doing a very good job at practicing our communication skills on how to have a real conversation with each other. So the only forms of conversation that people are used to are yelling at each other online or asking and answering questions. Unfortunately, that then translates into how we communicate with each other on an interpersonal level. So don't be thoroughly offended that people are giving you advice that doesn't apply to you. It's not about you. It's not even fully about them. It's about the society we have created. So it's okay. If people give you advice that doesn't fit, that doesn't work, that doesn't apply, or that's only partially in the field, weigh it. Apply what you can, discard what you can't. In all things, my tagline for when I give my friends advice, my tag is, I don't have to live with the consequences of this advice, so you do what's best for you. This way, I do 2 things in that situation. I absolve them of feeling like they have to do this thing or I'm going to feel disappointed, because that's a real thing. And 2, I absolve myself of, if they do it and it doesn't work out, them coming to me being like, what do I do next? Or you said to do this, because the reality is I don't have to live with the consequences of enacting my advice. You don't have to live with the consequences of enacting your advice. So if someone chooses to not take your advice, if someone chooses to not receive your advice, there are many reasons why. So here are my 3 steps. Now, again, this is not at all a full list, just my top 3 in both categories.